Hey there, we're up to video number 6 now for the Max Q Piper J3 Cub Restoration. I'm Mart, and I've got all kinds of stuff to show you today. Been a lot of things that I've gotten accomplished, so we're going to get right into it here. The wingtip bow is completely installed. I put a couple of coats of spar varnish on it before I went to the detailed fitting process and drilled new holes for the mounting hardware. And then I filled those holes actually with some of the polyfiber super fill, kind of like the airplane Bondo. Super lightweight, real easy to mix up. It'd be not difficult to dig out of there in the future to get to the hardware, but just gives a little greater opportunity for the fabric to show no signs of anything there. So I think that's kind of a nice thing to do. Also, in the process of I put the aileron hinges all back in, and so then I wanted to tweak everything to make sure that they were well in alignment, and even the aileron, which this was previously covered. This isn't the cover that's going to be on this one in the long run, but so the hinges on the aileron itself were a little out of alignment, so I got everything lined up so that the pins dropped in nicely. And as you can see, there's no noises, no drag. This is a very happy aileron sitting in this bay. The hinges are all doing great, and we got nice clearances out here at the tip. Of course, this the tip and the outboard rib here in this bay connect to each other. So that is all in really nice shape, and very happy with that. Love the round wingtips. I know a lot of people like on Super Cubs and such, not so much on J3s, but go with square tips and such. But I don't know, I'm just old school. I love the round wingtips. So then there's been a lot of work going on with the leading edges. So the outboard piece, this compound curve fancy piece, it's pretty common for them to be dented up from running into hangers over the years and such. So I took a hammer and cautiously knocked out the bigger dents. And when I did that on the Super Cub project back in 2017, one was really beat up, and so I really worked on it, and I was quite impressed that I did a tremendous job getting the dents out of it. The only problem was when I went to put it back to see how it fit, I had changed the shape so much by stretching the aluminum, by taking those dents out, it was not even close. There was no way it was going to fit. So I actually had to replace it with a used one. But so here, I was very cautious, and the dents weren't nearly as big for sure. But I did knock out the majority of the dents, and then I did put a little bit of the fill, the super fill, on there as well, so that it will feel and look really nice once it's covered. So I believe you have to be very cautious about using a Bondo type, and of course it's not Bondo, it's Superfill. It's lighter weight, and it's designed for aircraft use, but we don't cover, or we don't put filler on structures like this the way you do in cars. But there are times and places where it's acceptable to do so, and that seems to be one there. So I was real happy that that still fits nicely. Another thing I'll do, and I haven't figured out for sure what I'm going to do, but where it overlaps to the tip bow, there's a bit of a drop off there because of the thickness of the aluminum and such. So I'll do something to try to minimize the visual on that as well. Those are the kinds of things I like to try to do to make the fabric in the finished product look super nice. It won't be 100% perfect, but if you don't pay any attention to those things, they do become fairly noticeable if you start looking close. So it's kind of a nice area to try to do little things there. We'll maybe talk about that later as we get closer to the actual fabric covering. So the outer leading edge skin, as you may already know, on a Cub does not go all the way to the spar like the other sections do. Of course, the far one is not in place at all, but at least on the metal spar, I haven't been in a wood spar Cub wing to know exactly what the leading edge is like on that. But regardless, this outside one on the original setup is not only, it's 16 thousandths and it's soft aluminum. In fact, I've got a piece down here that I can show. This is some of the original leading edge here. So this is what's really interesting. This stuff is so soft. It's super easy to form, which of course, yeah, that makes it easy to build a leading edge out of. The problem is it's also not really good at impact resistance. So this is 20 thousandths and it's 2024 T3, so it's a much harder aluminum. And so it's much more robust when it's in place, but it is also harder to work with, especially with this radius, and that's why ultimately you need to put a set in that leading edge, which that's what this apparatus is for here. This is actually the inboard section of leading edge, which does go all the way to the spar, and that's why it has these flanges here, and there'll be screws that go into the spar. But this apparatus is basically what I used on the Super Cub. After doing a bunch of research online, I saw something similar to this, and I thought, well, I'll give it a try. And it turns out this is really quite easy to deal with. Getting the piece to initially start to go down in between the two walls, you have to push a little bit, but it isn't too bad. And in fact, what I'm doing on this is I'm doing it myself by positioning myself in the middle and using both arms on the PVC, and then I can push it right down. When I did it on the Super Cub, I had a person on each end, but it's a little harder to control the two people, whereas if it's just one person, you can keep an eye on things. And then the most important part, in my opinion, really, with all of this is I make marks. There's two lines here that are drawn all the way across that line up with where the PVC is supposed to be, which, as you can tell, the top side is taller than the lower side because of the shape of, you know, the curve of the top of the rib shape here. So this is not in the middle, but it has to be in the right spot, and it has to stay in the right spot as you push down to put this radius in the leading edge. So those lines there help me to keep an eye on that tube. And it's not, I mean, you can be slightly off, but you can't get way off. And like my point being, if you don't have marks there, there's not a real good chance you're going to be in the right spot. But with some marks on there, you can continually monitor as you push down where that radius is winding up. And then what happens here is this just gets pushed all the way down to the very bottom till the PVC basically hits bottom. And that's where the last little bit especially is where you put the most amount of set in that aluminum, which, as it turns out, well, let me actually, over here, I've got a piece. This was a test piece, and you can see there isn't a huge amount of set in that, but that's all it takes to be able to get a good fit around the nose of the ribs. Because this area here is really where it's difficult to get contact. From about here on, this is all quite flexible. It's not any trouble at all to get it to conform to the shape of the rib. But here, without that set, with 20 thousandths and 2024 T3, you'd have a real hard time, I would think anyway, to get that, you'd fight it like crazy. This makes it to where you don't have to fight it hardly at all. And then I was going to show that you relieve the aluminum where the ribs and nose ribs go through. And so to do that, I used a hole saw before the flanges were bent. And you can kind of see, I think maybe if we look at this again, so you can see that I've got a hole here, but this hole was drilled before this flange was bent. And I did that over there on the flat floor table, and used a hole saw and a cordless drill, and then a piece of I had a little piece of scrap wood that I drilled a larger hole in, and I put that over the aluminum where the hole was going to go, so that it's holding all of this really nice and flat when you're using that hole saw, so you get a good hole. So anyway, that all worked well, and then I put the angle in afterwards, and then these all get, there's a couple different ways these get relieved here to allow the rib to come up into this spot. Well, we'll show that another time, but so those are yet to go in. But once I get those cut into that, and the rest of the set in it, that piece will be ready to come down here and be fit then to go into the last part of the leading edge. So, and then I use these straps to pull it snug. which, like, these outer straps are at compression strut locations, so the spars are well supported. I put a little piece of wood in here temporarily for strapping in the middle, and you have to be very cautious with the straps. It takes a little bit of force to be able to get the aluminum to lay flat, but obviously wings are fragile. In the big scheme, they're fragile, and so you have to be cautious. And that's, if you don't know much about airplanes, that's one of the most important lessons, especially with small aircraft, is to understand that the reason airplanes can fly is because they're very lightweight. And when you make large structures very lightweight, well, they're a lot more fragile. So you always have to be cautious and always be thinking about any stresses that you're putting on the components while you're working on them. So the wing has been trammeled. I did that before I started the leading edge, and which I'll show another thing here too, which is traditional. So out here on the outer sawhorse, I have an extra 1/2 inch spacer put in here to elevate that spar, because the wing will wind up being twisted intentionally for aerodynamics once it's installed on the airframe. And so we'd prefer to have those leading edges attached when there's a little bit of twist in the wing, so that they're not fighting the effort to twist. Now, I understand some people do put leading edges on with the wing completely flat, and it's not like a major problem, but most people would put that spacer of some sort in there. I've seen anywhere from 3/8 to 3/4 of an inch. 1/2 inch, I think, is going to work just fine. So, so trammeling the wing. So all the wires were snug before I started on the tip bow and before I started on the leading edge. And to do that, first what I did is I took my trammel points, which I took a piece of conduit and some gas line unions, couplers, whatever. And I bought the points. These are replacement points for a trammel set, and I bought those cheap on Amazon. And I threaded here, I put a knob at the top and threaded so that you can loosen the knob and you can slide the point along the tube to whatever position that you need. And so that's the method that you use to be able to tell whether or not you have the spars in the location they need to be. So real quick, I guess, let's see if we can demonstrate this here. That as it turns out, this wing has they've put little depressions, indentations here where the marks would be, and you can see my trammel point fell right down in that. Now, I've never seen that before, and I would not recommend putting center punch points on a spar, but they were done here at some point in time in the past, and they don't show any signs of concern, and it would have been a long time ago. So, but if we come back over here now, we can see that I hit right into that spot going the other way. So if these two dimensions diagonally are the same, then you know that these bays are basically at 90-degree angles, and that is the goal. Now, the interesting thing about a Cub wing is that the spars don't end at the same point. Like a Super Cub and I believe all the short wing Pipers, I'm pretty sure the wing attach fittings are equidistant down the spar. But on the Cub, the main spar goes all the way in almost to the center of the airplane. So the point is, they're not square this way to each other, but they are square when you come up with a reference point, you know, after they both get going. I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, from the compression strut on, everything should be a square 90-degree condition. So the other thing I'm going to do before I go to put fabric on both of these wings is I'm going to go ahead and pull the fuselage outside, and I'm going to trial fit these wings to make sure that they do fit the fuselage well, because if they don't, some tweaking could be done to the wires at that time. But once they're covered, you can't really, it's exceedingly difficult to try to make any changes that way. And I've never been a fan of big hammers when you're trying to put bolts through to attach wings. So the goal here is to have the wings fit very well so the bolts are really happy to get into their spot. So that's a bit of an update on the trammeling side of things. The other thing is that it's not just a matter of getting the wires tight, but the amount of tension. And so there's a method for that by using a fish scale, and you pull against them, and at about 15 pounds of pull, you should have about a 1/2 inch separation between the wires. So that was all done methodically. And the other thing I was going to say is that what I did was, once I used the trammel points to find out were the spars already in proper alignment, and they were not. They were off some. So when I started the initial tightening process, I tightened the wire that is helping to bring the spars to the point that they should be. And so once you get that, you're not just trying to tighten the wires, but you're trying to tighten the wires in the direction that brings the diagonal trammel points to their proper place. And I think that makes the process a lot quicker. And it didn't take too long, actually, then to get the first bay to have tension on both wires and really close to where I wanted to be. And then I tweaked that some. And then you just do the process again for each bay, and then going back and double checking. This to me is very much a procedure of check, double check, triple check as you're going along, because there is always the possibility that things are getting out of whack. So but it only took, I don't know, took an hour, hour and a half to have the wing fully trammeled to where I was very happy with it. So, and then once you finish that process, the lock nuts here get tightened down. And then I went over with yellow and gray paint and touched up anywhere paint had been knocked off for corrosion protection's sake. So that all seems to have gone pretty well. Let me see here what else on my list. Oh, so I was going to show that down here underneath where the strut fitting comes out of the wing on the main spar, there's a formed aluminum in the original leading edge. Let me see here if I can get a good view of it. So you can see that piece that I cut it out of the original leading edge, and it has a rolled lip on it that makes it very nice as it goes around the strut fitting. And with the 2024 T3 and the fact that I don't have any super fancy tools, I don't know how I'd be able to put that rolled lip on there, and it's probably not absolutely necessary, but it does make a more finished look and feel for the fabric work. And I don't even remember how the fabric, like maybe the fabric doesn't even allow it to be seen, but regardless, it's what was there originally, and I kind of took it as an interesting challenge. I did this same thing on the Super Cub. I cut that piece out, and then I used a dimple die and flush rivets and bucked the rivets in, and it's just kind of a neat little exercise in fabrication, and it went really well on the Super Cub, and it seemed to go really well here. And you only have to do it on the leading edge, well, no, on the main spar, because you only have a leading edge on the main spar. So you only have to do it once on each wing. And again, I enjoyed the process, and in fact I realized I had borrowed a dimple die when I did it before, and I didn't have a dimple die, so I actually just made one really quick. It's not a full, because normally you'd have the female side and the male side, and I didn't have a quick and easy way to make the male side. I thought about trying to make it on the lathe. In fact, I drilled that hole on the lathe. But actually, you can just use a rivet here for, I don't know how the focus is here on the GoPro, so maybe I'm blurring you out here. But so what I wound up doing is using the rivet and put the rivet in the hole. See if we can do this here. Probably not. So anyway, put the rivet in the hole, and then put the rivet in the die like that, and then I used the air hammer with the flush rivet head and give that a few thumps, and by golly, if that little rivet doesn't wind up creating a beautiful dimple. And so I did this on the soft 16 thousandths piece that I had cut out, which was super easy, but then I also put the dimple, of course, on the leading edge, and then put these rivets in and bucked them, and the whole thing just worked out really, really slick. So it's kind of fun doing some fabricating along the way, a little more so than just remove and replace. So anyway, that went really well, and let me see here. Let me check my cheat sheet. Yeah, I think we've covered all the things that I was going to go over. So this wing is getting really, really close to being ready to set aside, and then as mentioned before, I'm hoping that on the other wing here, I will fly right through that guy now that I'm approaching expert status. Haha. But very familiar now with the componentry and processes, and so again, I think that'll go fairly quickly. And we'll get these wings ready for fabric here real soon, and then we'll check the fit on the fuselage, and then I still have some fuselage repair and stringer work to do before I can get started with putting in the soft baggage for the first process in it of fabric work. You may know this airplane is owned by Andy, who owns Strut Systems, which is the fabric covering process that I put on the Super Cub, and it went really well. There's a lot of unique features about it. I really like it, and it's definitely a little different than the other systems. So my big suggestion there is, if you're looking at Sturts, or if you're doing Sturts right now, just pay real close attention to the manual and follow procedure. If you follow procedure, I sure had no troubles with it. And the thing that I specifically really enjoyed was that on the Super Cub, as I've shown before in these videos, I put the flattener in the paint, which gave it a beautiful satin finish. It's not flat, but beautiful satin finish, and it just, to me, it's a mesmerizing finish. You can get the super glossy look if you like that. That's the standard polyurethane with the Sturts, but with the flattener in it, it gives a whole new dimension that I really, really like. So, but I'm oftentimes in the minority, so that's okay. But anyway, so we're making great progress here, and the shop is working well. It's just barely big enough, but that's better than being too small. And I'm having fun, and I'm really happy to be working on an airplane. So that is the update for this week. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.